Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, we're going to go over some signs that I think indicates if a man is insecure. Now, it doesn't mean every single one of these entirely highlights an individual's insecurity, but more so the overall picture. And insecurity is not always a bad thing. People can be insecure for a number of reasons, and many individuals who are insecure come from traumatic backgrounds. So this is not a space where I'm saying to make fun of other individuals who are insecure when you might feel that you're more secure than they are. I don't think that's a good idea, or just to highlight that insecure men are bad or dangerous. I'm not saying any of these things because I don't think that's always the case. This is just informational purposes, and I'm going to make the female version as well. It's just to highlight what I notice is that individuals who are male that are insecure actually may behave differently than a female that's insecure. And I think there are some fundamentals that are relatively the same, but the reason I'm compiling this video, the two videos, is to kind of show more of the specifics for male and female, because I think a lot of times when individuals are wondering what an insecure person looks like, they're not as specific. And I think that specifics can be helpful. I'm a specific person. I like specifics, so maybe that's just where I'm coming from. The first one is something we've already talked about to some extent, self-deprecating humor. Usually some men do this because they're trying to be more approachable, but there are usually other ways to be more approachable, and them being a little bit comfortable making themselves the target of their own jokes already says something about them. But sometimes men who are self-deprecating, there's a part of them, not all men are like this, where they're wanting attention or reassurance against that. And so if they make a joke that maybe they're not attractive for whatever reason, sometimes they're trying to listen and hear if anyone disagrees with them to get that reassurance instead of being more comfortable and confident in either asking if that's what they need for whatever reason or believing in themselves. And so that's the first one, self-deprecating humor. The next one might not show up all the time. It's a little bit more common in interpersonal contexts, particularly romantic contexts, getting defensive easily, especially over small feedback or jokes. If you are a business owner and you've worked with a lot of different types of men, you might know some of them don't take feedback as often. If you are a female and you have a husband or boyfriend and you feel like sometimes he gets defensive, it might be because he's insecure. Also, it depends on how you're saying it as well. You're not supposed, you always want to say things in a more palatable way, but this is definitely a common one. And I see this a lot too. My dad owns a business. He has a couple of them, and he has a lot of people that he who works for some of his companies. And he has always told me, like, there are certain types of people, most of his employees are men, based on the types of work that he does. They just tend to have that more specialization. He always mentions, like, there are certain types of, workers where he knows he can be more open about the feedback in hopes that they can grow. Others, they don't want to grow. They want to stay exactly where they are. And so sometimes that can be, they're just insecure. They don't want to take the feedback and they're too afraid of that. And that's just the way some people are. The next one is they shut down during conflict, or they crash out basically instead of communicating. And so the conflict is so overwhelming that sometimes it makes them feel a type of way. They might feel criticized pretty easily. They might be struggling with what you're saying, and they might get mad at you, crash out, lash out, get mad. They might shut down because it's too much. Of course, this is dependent, because if somebody is being very overwhelming, sometimes people don't know what else to do but to shut down, or they crash out because they're very overwhelmed. But the main point is, instead of communicating, insecure men may do this without any communication at all, because a lot of times they're not very familiar with their own feelings, or they feel insecure about what they're feeling. And so they may react to something they're feeling rather than communicating what's happening. So for example, if you're saying something that's not something it's already turning into a conflict, and then they start crashing out and they're not communicating what you've actually done, they can pinpoint. Sometimes it's because they can't express themselves, but other times they might actually be insecure about the situation, or they're feeling a type of way because they're overly specific about certain triggers. So if you said something like, I wish that you would be more comfortable taking the dishes, out of the dishwasher. I feel like I'm always the one doing it. It's not that big of a deal, but it's frustrating because I'm always the one doing it, and I wish that you would do it a little bit more often. They might get mad. They might start thinking that you called them messy and lazy, even though you didn't. And that's what I mean by insecure. They took something, crashed it out, or they shut down completely because they're perceiving you saying something that you're not. The next one is overly focused on status, money, or appearance as a form of proof of worth. There's nothing wrong with wanting your status to be a certain way, earning a financial portfolio or something you're proud of, that's fine, or your appearance. But doing that to prove your worth, it means that you initially don't feel that you have worth. There are a lot of people who, especially if they felt like they didn't get this when they were young, they felt like they were unattractive, or maybe they were bullied, or they grew up in a state of low finance or poverty, or they had low status from their perception. Sometimes they want to overcompensate for that. And that is a sign of insecurity because they felt insecure when they were young about that. The next one is blaming others for his loneliness, rejection, or failures. Any gender can do this, but we're seeing this a little bit more common with men nowadays, or at least outwardly so. A lot of men who are insecure, they may actually blame others for their loneliness, rejection, or failures, even though it's not necessarily anyone's fault. It could just be a variety of reasons, but it's sometimes hard for these men to take some look at themselves and think that maybe there's something they could adjust for whatever reason. Maybe they could be more social. Maybe they could be a little bit more nicer. Maybe they could be less negative towards the opposite sex or their friends or whoever, because this is not just them doing it towards a lady. Some of these men might do it towards their friends, or they may push people away, or they may blame others for whatever reason. And that's something that comes with insecurity typically. The next one is mocking others' emotions, their body or intelligence. And this is not just, like I had mentioned, they're not just doing this to a lady. They could do this to another man, right? Where a man, this was one that came up recently in one of my sessions. And obviously I'm not specifically saying exactly what it is. I'm going to give a version of it. But in the area I'm in, there's a lot of military folks. And in the military, there's a very, at least in this area, even like art is considered feminine, which I didn't know that before, but like art, music, interior decorating, these are things that some men, not music, but like wanting to decorate your room like a certain way apparently is feminine to some men in this perspective. And so they might mock another man simply because he wants, I don't know, his bed sheets to match, him to have a more darker tone in his room. That I think is like normal, but some men in that category might make fun of another man for that. But that's what I mean by mocking others for their emotions, their bodies, their intelligence, their choices. That could be a significant sign, depending on how extreme it is, that this man, the one mocking, is insecure about his own masculinity, because another person might feel like that's inspirational, let me do that, or just leave it alone, right? Everybody's different. And the next one and the last one is taking everything personally. If somebody takes every single thing personally, this is, of course, it's abnormal and unhealthy mentally, but it also is a sign of insecurity. Anything that somebody says, a lot of it, at least some portion of it, is based on themselves. It doesn't always have to do with you. But even if a person is just, I don't know, they're tired, they're not as expressive or animated as they typically are, someone might take that personally and think you don't like them, or you're mean, or you're hurtful, and that would be a sign of insecurity. If for whatever reason it is geared towards you, having a conversation or asking about it might be more beneficial than immediately jumping to the conclusion that it is in fact personal. So these are some of the signs that a man is insecure. I hope this video is helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.